In conversation with DR Rawson. DR Rawson is a seasoned entrepreneur, educator, and visionary storyteller with a passion for character education. Over the course of his career, he has founded more than 30 companies across a wide range of industries, blending innovation with purpose. As co-creator of TinyTales Land, he has dedicated his life to teaching young children essential character traits through captivating 100-word story called Drabbles, supported by vivid illustration, activity sheets, and videos. A proud father of six, grandfather of 15, and great-grandfather of seven, Mr. Rawson draws inspiration from his family to craft content that resonates with children worldwide. His mission is to ensure that every child, regardless of background, has access to tools that build respect, kindness, responsibility, and resilience. Rooted in Addison, Nevada, DR continues to expand TinyTales Land into classrooms, homes, and communities around the globe, using storytelling as a powerful vehicle for personal growth and lifelong learning. And on today's episode of Auto Interview, it's my utmost pleasure, joy, and excitement to have on the show today DR Rawson. How are you doing today, DR?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, it's my joy, really, my excitement to have you on the show today. Quite excited we are here to sit down and have a conversation around your beautiful titles. Thank you very much for coming on.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Yeah. So, dear, I need to first say that, you've written a few books as part of the Life Lesson for Youth series. I wanted to ask you, would you be up for talking about how some of those came to life?
Yes, absolutely. When I tried to retire for the 10th time,
Yeah.
a friend of mine said to me, DR, you ought to write. And I said, should I share with you what my professor said in college? He said, not necessary. I've seen your
Mm.
emails, I've seen your proposals. You can write. I said, well, give it a shot. So my
Well,
first year, I wrote 6 books. And then I found a woman on medium.com who challenged us to write 100-word stories. And they would give us things like write a 100-word story and be sure to include the dimming moon in
mm.
the story. It was ridiculous. So I was talking to a friend of mine in Arizona, and I said, I feel really stupid writing these stories. I don't even like these
Wow.
stories. He said, why don't we write for children? I said, that's a really good idea. So he and I decided on that basis right then, that was August 4th of last year, to
Mm.
start TinyTales.press. It has ultimately grown into Tiny Tales LLC, but the company has also grown. We used to just publish books. We have 17 books and 3 journals that are out there.
Mm.
Plus, we have a set of books, which is our educational learning books. This
Wow.
is student, this is for the teacher.
Wow.
And we have coloring books. We've got about 25 different coloring books and a number of other things. But we have a
Wow.
website. We're on YouTube. We've got 200 videos on YouTube with over
Wow.
5,000 subscribers.
Oh, wow.
And we've done a podcast we've only had it out there 6 months. We've got over 1,000 downloads. I mean,
Wow.
it's been pretty successful in the ways that we're going. And just in tomorrow, actually, I talked with a TV producer about taking Tiny Tales to the TV.
Oh, wow. That's an amazing one, really. I love your take on that. So beautiful, so lovely, so great, and quite compelling as well. Thank you for sharing. And also, dear, I saw you describe yourself as a possibilist, and I need to say I really love that. Now, what does that mean to you, and how does it show up in your work?
My first business was when I was 21. When I
Mm,
was 22, 23 actually, I bought another company and I sold my first and bought another company. And one of the clients I was trying to help, he was stuck. He just couldn't make his company grow. He couldn't figure out how to get out of this corner that he put
mm,
himself into. And I said, well, have you considered this or considered that or considered this? And I just went on and on. And he said, geez, you're like a possibilist. You got all the answers. And I said, well,
Wow.
I don't know about that. Not at 23 years old.
Wow.
And somehow that word just stuck. And all through my career, people have kind of known me as the possibilist because when I'm in a meeting, I can see possibilities that others don't seem to be able to see.
I love that. I had to write it down, really. I think it's a good thing to help with human being changing their mindset. Like, when others see things quite impossible, and you get it like, this can be doable. We can adjust a bit. Let's take this other route. What if we do this way? And it's just so beautiful. You're given a proposition that eventually leads to you being addressed as a possibilist. That's a lovely one, really. I love that. I love
Yeah, I
that.
like it better than any degree, I can tell you that.
That's quite fun. And also, I wanted to ask you, how do you decide which life lesson to tackle in your story? Do you go by things you've seen kids struggle with, or just what feels important at the moment to you?
There are 25 essential character traits. The
Wow.
five basic traits are respect, resilience, responsibility,
Mm,
kindness, and love. No. But do they? No.
no.
And beyond that, there's another 20 things like honesty
Mm,
and joy. There's a number of others that should also be in that list. So we take from the 25.
yeah.
So we have three of us that write these stories, and every one of us, I think, has a different method. But for me, I just start at the top and start going down. And when I finish that whole list, I go back and do it again
Mm,
because you can write so many different stories about the same thing,
yeah.
particularly only 100 words, exactly 100 words. That's what a
Mm.
drabble is.
Wow. I love your take on that, really. And I'm actually coming back to the conversation around the Drabble. Yeah. But then I wanted to ask you, you've built over 30 companies. But TinyTales Land is clearly close to your heart. What moment or experience sparked this mission to reach every child with character education? I would love your take on that.
I grew up in obviously a different period than you did in time. I was born in the 40s and raised in the 50s, 60s,
Wow.
and finished high school when I was in the mid 60s.
Wow.
And I didn't go to college until I was 25. And then I finished college when I was 27. I finished 4 years and two. And then I went to law school when I was 29. I did 3 years and left
Mm.
because I was already making more money than other than law
Wow.
grad.
Wow.
So that it wasn't worthwhile. But what made me say this is so important is when I realized the depth of the education. I watched as my own children had education stripped from them. When I was a
Mm.
kid, there was home economics. There's no home economics anymore. When I was a
Mm.
kid, you could play instruments in elementary school. You can't do that anymore. When I was a kid, you could play it in middle school. Some middle schools have instruments, most do not. Sports was taken away. I
Mm.
played football in high school. I played for the Air Force, and I played
Wow.
semi-pro. So I saw this as a terrible thing. I mean, what I learned in team sports alone was
Mm.
amazing. Now you start taking all those things away, then the kids are just focusing on what? Reading, writing, and arithmetic. That's it.
Mm.
But the reading that they're doing is reading that, yeah, they might use.
Mm.
They might some way. They learn how to read the words, but they don't understand the meaning behind them
At
quite
all.
yet. So the character, when I was a kid, respect was one of the first things you were taught. You
Mm.
needed to respect another person. Didn't matter
Mm.
who they were, you needed to respect them automatically
Yeah.
because they were a fellow human being.
Yeah.
And that was something that we did.
Mm.
The idea that you would key a car, for example. Oh my gosh, that's somebody else's property. That
Mm.
doesn't show respect. Leave it
Yeah.
alone, not yours. And then taking responsibility. We went through a whole, some of the kids were taught, well, let me give you a trophy because you participated. When I was a kid, you either won or if you came in second, you were the first loser.
Wow.
Everybody understood that. And
Mm,
so that created drive. Most of the people that I work with today that are younger, they can't believe the drive that I have at 78. I
mm,
do because I'm on a mission. I'm on a
mm.
mission to make sure the kids get this because it's
Wow.
so important. But one of the things I hope to do is a TED Talk, and this television network wants to sponsor me on that. But the first question I'm going to ask in that TED Talk is this. Let me ask you a question. And the question would be, what if in your world, everybody that you met understood and practiced respect? Would our world be different?
Good
Now,
question. It will.
you could say the same thing about any of the other traits as well.
Mm,
If everyone took responsibility for what they do, would the world be
absolutely.
different?
Mm,
Absolutely. If
absolutely.
everyone was honest, would the world be different? Of course
Very
it would be.
well. Yeah.
Yeah. So we created TinyTales Land, and the methodology was that we have humans, frogs, owls, insects all living together, and
Mm,
they all speak, of course, but they all live under the 25 essential character traits. So
wow.
if they are all respecting one another, if they're all taking responsibility, if they're
Mm,
all being kind to one another,
mm,
what kind of a magical world would that be?
mm. Wow.
So that's why we created these books. This is the teacher's book. It's very thick. It's 220 some odd pages.
Wow.
This is the student's book, which is 76 pages. The
Mm,
teacher's book, we primarily encourage the teachers to just put it on their iPad.
wow.
But in here is 36 lessons, so all 25 traits are taught, and
Mm,
the core traits are taught twice. And then there's some miscellaneous lessons in here. But
mm,
the point is, if we can start getting young kids to understand what respect means, that impacts their families, that
yeah.
impacts the communities, it impacts them as a person. They become a better citizen, they become
Mm,
a better future leader, future business person. There isn't any aspect of their life that
mm.
understanding those character traits doesn't impact. That's why I'm passionate about it.
Wow, that's an amazing one, really. And I love your dedication, your excitement, your passion talking about this, really. It come across so vividly in your answer to this question. It's so clear, so distinct, so evident, so real and raw. And I need to say that's such a commendable, well written, and great mission you have on. That's quite beautiful, really. Thank you so much for
Thank you.
sharing.
You're
I'm
welcome.
inspired as well. Listening to you talk about this is quite inspiring
Good.
because
That's
it
great.
isn't a small. It isn't a small joke. Or it isn't a small job building over 30 companies. That's a lot. That's an achievement, a lifetime one.
Yes, it is. Yeah, some of it's been absolutely pure luck. My first company was pure luck. I didn't have any money, and a group of people decided that they would back me because they thought I was a pretty good salesman. And they put product in a where they built a warehouse, put product in a warehouse, and said to me, "Look, after a couple of years, you can pay us back." So
Mm.
I fortunately had 10 products to sell. I sold all the original underground plumbing for Walt Disney World, and I sold a product that everybody knows today, but at the time, I was the only distributor in the United States for it. It's
Wow.
called PVC pipe.
Oh, wow.
So after 14 months, I sold the company. They gave me a nice big check. And I thought I'd just go live like everybody else and get a job. And the next job that I got, this guy was such a jerk. I said
Wow.
to him, "Why don't you sell your company?" He says, "Why would I do that?" I said, "Because you have 23 employees out here and you don't know any of their names. Let's
Wow.
start with that. The only reason you're here is to collect a check. Because the company makes good money, you want that check at the end of the month. And that's a
Mm.
poor reason to be here." I said, "Why don't you just sell the company?" He said, "Who would I sell it to?" I said, "Well, you could sell it to me if the price is right." He
Wow.
says, "How would you how old are you?" I said, "I'm 23." I said, "See, you're making my point. You don't know anything about me. You hired me, but you don't know anything about me." So I was national sales manager for the company. And I told him to sell the company. So he wrote down on a piece of paper what he would sell the company for. And one of the things the guy did, which just annoyed me and annoyed everybody else, he had a $5 million painting hanging like your picture is behind you, and he would point to all the time. I got paintings like this at home, and no. So I looked at that number and I realized that he had driven away a lot of business because of his attitude.
Mm.
So I said to him, okay, I'll give you a check for that under one condition. He said, what's that? I said, you have to pick up all your stuff and take that painting, and I'll give you a company car, and you drive it home and you never, ever come back.
Wow.
He said, I can do that. I said, great. When he walked out the door, the people in the back were jumping up and down and yelling and yay, yay. And 3 years later, I sold the company to all those people.
Wow, that's quite a lot to digest. That's quite a lot to take in. That's a
When
lot you've shared with
years old.
us.
Yeah, it's a lot, but it was a fun company, and
Hmm.
we sold overhead lifting equipment, cranes, and wire rope and chain, and all
Wow.
that. It was very, very interesting.
Interesting. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And also, dear, you talk about teaching through storytelling. Why do you believe short 100-word drabbles are such an effective way to shape young minds and values? I love your take on that.
Let's just look at what's happening today.
Yeah.
TikTok. How long is TikTok, right?
Yeah.
It's a it's a minute.
Yeah.
Our stories take 43 seconds to read.
Mm,
The extra time between that and a minute, a parent could say, well, let me ask you, Bobby, do you understand kindness? Do you exhibit kindness to your friends? Do you show them
mm,
kindness? Do you treat them nicely?
mm.
Nice reflective questions, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Dad, I do. That's great. That shows that you already understand kindness.
Mm,
And that's it. That's the end of the minute. They're gone. They got a great lesson and a great story, unique characters. All of our characters are all drawn by us, all done in-house. I draw them and two of the other artists draw them.
mm.
And so they're done by AI. So
Wow.
we do that. We spend a lot of time doing that because the graphic has to match the story. Because right now we're just getting ready to change this book into something else. It's going to
Wow.
be this book plus English as a second language.
Wow.
So, all
Wow.
around the world in places like the Philippines, like America, I just talked to somebody from Iowa the other day, and they said it used to be that we just dealt with kids that were Spanish or English. Now we're dealing with Spanish, English, Asian languages, several of them, and we're dealing
Wow.
with South American and Portuguese, and all this is coming in, and we don't know how to handle it.
Mm.
We have the books that will teach them in English and their native language.
Yeah.
That's an English as a second language
Mm.
program. And then we have also a program for ELL, which is people with multiple languages.
Yeah.
As you know, coming from Nigeria, you probably speak more than two languages.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so a lot of people do. My friend in Israel speaks 11. And
Wow.
so,
That's a lot.
yeah, that's a lot of languages. And so all of that becomes important. And
Mm.
then there's another thing that's important. You probably don't remember this, given your age, you might. Do you remember the Boy Scouts, Girl
Yeah.
Scouts?
I've heard about the
You
Boy
remember?
Scout.
So one of the things we came up with was the thing called the activity guide. Well, when you're a Boy Scout or Girl Scout, you go through the book and it says, okay, you have to write a letter to your grandparents. That's a thing that you have to do. And when
Mm.
you complete that, you get a merit badge. You have to
Oh.
learn how to start a fire. When you complete that, you get a merit badge, right? So I
Mm.
don't know if the camera can see this, but so this is a story of kindness. See that little certificate over there? That gets signed by the teacher.
Yeah.
Then you can see this very shadow up here,
Yeah.
the shadow of a sticker that we give the kids. That's a nice, shiny, bright sticker that says kindness on it.
Mm.
And one day when they're your age or my age, they look back in this book and they go, wow, I learned all about character from this book.
Wow. I love that.
Isn't that a great idea? And then at the end, there's a brighter certificate that's given to them at the end, which signifies that they've learned all 25
Wow.
of the character traits. And it's quite nice. It's something that I think is needed. If we're going to
Yeah.
teach the kids something, let's teach them something and let's make it useful. And we don't need to preach. I
Mm.
learned that as a father. You can't get kids to change by saying, "Sit down there for a minute. I want to tell you what you did wrong,"
Mm.
and do it for an hour. The kids will never learn it. What they will learn is that my dad is so obnoxious. He spends all this time telling me about stuff, and I can't remember half the stuff he talks about.
Well, I love your take on that. That's so true. Quite relatable. Thank you for sharing. And I'd also like to ask you, I'd like to know if you've ever had a moment where you're like, okay, this is a great story, but it is 120 words. How hard is it to cut it down without losing the heart of it?
Well, I'll tell you the answer to that after I first tell you this.
Okay.
My co-founder, Rick Allen, uh, Rick wrote a technical paper that was 1,100 words.
Hmm.
And we were in the middle of writing, I think at that time, about ten news stories a week.
Oh.
And I said, why don't you take that technical paper and boil it down to 100 words? He said, are you
Mm.
kidding? I said, I'm not kidding at all. Now,
Wow.
you've read technical papers, you've read white papers, I'm sure, and you've read them and you go, okay, yep, read that, file that away in the drawer. That's done.
Mm.
I can promise you that when you see something like that 1,100 word story
Yeah.
boiled down to 100 words, you read it and go, are you serious? What? And you read it again because you couldn't quite believe all the things that were packed into those 100 words. And then
Absolutely.
you finish it and you read it again.
Mm.
You read it again. Now you've read it four times. You've read 400 words instead of 1,100 words, but you got four times as much as what you would have gotten out of the 1,100 words.
Absolutely. Very true.
So, how hard is it to write 1,100 words?
Mm.
Well, actually, once you do it and you get used to doing it, you actually think of stories in approximately 100 words.
Yeah.
Sometimes they come out like 120, sometimes they come out like 86,
Yeah.
and so you have to go back through it and say, "No, I need to talk more about this. I need to talk less about that," and eventually you'll get it to 100 words.
Mm.
The story.
Wow. Wow. That's such an amazing one, really. I need to say that I love your answers to these questions. I find it to be quite interesting, quite educative, and well instructive as well. Quite beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
Welcome.
Now, absolutely. Now, I want us to diversify a little bit into the take of readers' feedbacks, because one of the things that makes literature quite interesting to me is the way that it can be interpreted by different readers based on their opinion. And sometimes some readers might get a message intended by the author. Sometimes they might be close to getting the message. Sometimes they might be far from getting the message. And sometimes they might just hilariously misunderstand the book and interpret it upside down. And as interestingly fun as they sound, I would like to ask you, how do you feel when readers interpret your work differently than you intended? How does that make you feel as a storyteller?
First of all, they haven't. So I haven't had that experience. So these are our regular books. You can see they're not very thick,
Yeah.
and each of them has 31 stories, actually 32. There's one in here for the adult.
Oh.
So it has that number of stories. And I remember the first really important person we presented this to
Mm.
was the head of the Rotary for a
Oh.
particular state. And his
Oh.
wife was a retired teacher.
Oh, wow.
So we handed him a book and said, here, read a story and see what you think of it. So the guy opens it up and you see, well, we've got very vivid graphics, very
Wow.
short stories. So he
Wow.
reads a couple of stories and then he doesn't stop. He just keeps reading. And his wife
Mm.
says, I want to read one of those. So we give her a
Yeah.
book. She finishes before he does. And she throws her
Wow.
hands up in the air and she says, Why isn't this in every school? That was
Wow.
the very first reader reaction we'd ever received. We took that to mean there's value in what we're doing. And we had
Absolutely.
just started on the 25 character traits. Prior to that, we were just doing interesting stories and, cute stories that kids would
Mm,
enjoy. And we threw in the character traits and she said, you've got to get this in schools. I said, well,
mm,
that's, as you know, a tough process. And she says,
mm,
yes, it is, but you've got to work at it. Well, as I already told you, I'm 78 years old. If I work on getting this in a bunch of schools that way, I might
mm.
be 103 by the time I get it in 20 schools. I don't know. So
Wow.
there's another way to market, and that is top down. And the
Mm,
top down, if you go to people that already have resources, people
yeah.
who for years, education is my number one priority for kids, and they have the money to make that happen. They
Wow.
could put books in schools, right?
Mm,
So we developed a site, a website called TinyTales Impact.
mm.
And if somebody were to put $100,000 into buying our books,
Wow.
they would affect the lives of 6,000 students.
Wow.
Of 6,000 students.
Mm,
In general, as a human being, as you go through life, if you've affected the lives of beyond your children, maybe one or two other people,
yeah.
so that they become better people, they gain wealth, whatever it is, but you
Mm,
affected their life in some way, you're a success.
that's
I was
good.
homeless as a kid when I was nine and a half,
Mm,
and one man came out to me and said, "Why are you digging in my trash?" I said, "Well, sir, your food is excellent. All I have to do is wash it off, and I can feed my mother, brother, and two sisters." He said,
wow.
"Put it down."
What?
So I put it down, and he says, "Go get yourself a job." Well, the problem
Wow.
was when I was 9 and a half, I was 5'7". So I was quite big as a little kid. And he was a little Italian. I don't know how big he was, but I doubt he was even 5 foot.
Mm,
So he said to me, "Get a job." And I said, "Sir, as it happens, this morning I walked up and down the street, and when people found out that I was 9 and a half, they said, 'I'm sorry, I'd like to hire you, but I can't.'" So he said to me, after thinking about it for a couple of seconds, he said, "Can you wash dishes?" I said, "Absolutely." He said, "You're hired,
wow.
and I'll give you 3 meals a day for your family."
Wow.
Now that started us on a path. In a few months, his wife said, "Let me teach your mother how to be a waitress." She didn't know how to clean, cook, take care of children. She'd been
Wow.
raised as a Madonna. So she took her in and taught her a
Wow.
trade, taught her how
Wow.
to be a waitress.
Mm,
And my wife was quite good at it. She could speak with anybody. And
mm,
so people loved her. And she worked there from the time she was 29 till she was 44 when she died of cancer. So this man, one person, literally changed our whole family's trajectory.
mm.
Pretty
Wow.
interesting. Yeah.
Very interesting. That's a remarkable and memorable experience. As such kind of person, it's one that lasts in your memory for a long while. One that even in years to come you can never forget. One that you keep telling your children, "Oh, this is a person." You tell your children, like it's a memorable dealing. It's a life. Such kind of people are so rare to find, and when they find them, when you happen to find one, they're such an impactful set of people. That's amazing, really.
Great
Love.
life lesson. I've remembered it as other people. Through all
Mm,
these companies I've had, I've tried to be a mentor to people. I had
mm,
one young man who came to me and said, I really want to be a graphic artist. And I said, "Can you draw?" He said, "No, but I can use computers. And there's a great program called Photoshop that just came out.
mm,
And I want to buy it, but it's $700." This was
wow,
back in 1999. And he
wow,
said, I I can't afford that. I
wow.
said, "Well, if we buy it for you and you learn that program, will you give us the benefit of what you learned?" He said, "Absolutely." I
Mm,
said, "Okay." So I bought the program for him.
mm,
He helped us out with some great graphics for what we were doing.
Wow.
Since then, he's become an internationally known photographer working with
Wow.
graphics. And he does these big pictures that are like 20
Mm.
feet wide and 15 feet tall of
Wow.
interesting places all around the world.
Wow.
So that one person has changed. Another person came to me, and his circumstance was that he had a master's. He was a great programmer, but he was unhappy. He says, "I want to
Wow.
just do math, but I don't want to go back to school and burden my parents anymore." I
Mm.
said, "Well, have you even asked for a scholarship?" "No." I said, "Well, you need to go and try and get a scholarship." So I called up a couple of schools and I told them about this young man. I told him what a bright young man he was. And one of them gave him a full scholarship and he got a
Wow.
PhD in math. And today,
Wow.
professor of math at UNLV, not
Wow.
UNLV, but UC Irvine. So
Wow.
that's just a couple of examples, but you can do that and you can help people in a way that impact them for the rest of their lives.
Absolutely. Oh, wow. That's such a touching story, really. A powerful one, a pulling one, and I really love your take on that. Thank you for sharing. And now, just apart from the books we've mentioned so far, do you have any other works you've authored or say currently working on?
Right now, we're working on getting the book that I showed you that was the student's book, this book here. We're
Mm,
getting it so that instead of just having the this part of it, we incorporated the activities into this. We're going to take the activities out and just put ESL into it. And
mm.
so we'll have a second version of this, and that'll
Wow.
be ready probably the end of June.
Oh, interesting. That's amazing.
That'll be for third graders. And then by September, we'll
Oh,
have the fifth grade version out. And that's
wow.
a sign.
That's a great one too. Thank you for sharing. And just in case we have some viewers who are watching the interview, I would love to get a copy of any of your books. On what platform is it available on for purchase?
Amazon. It's also out there, Barnes and Noble and a bunch of other places, but you can get it on Amazon for sure. With Amazon, you go look up 36 stories or life lessons, and you'll
Mm,
find it.
mm,
If you want to look at my book, which is Unlikely, that's on Amazon and it's under DR Rawson. So you
mm.
can find any of those books out there.
That's interesting. And I left a link in the description part of this interview where interested viewers can get a copy of DR Rawson books directly on Amazon and Barnes& and Nobles on his website and also on other platforms. I also left a link to his social media pages for possible followings. So thank you so much, DR, for accepting the invitation to be featured on P English Literature. And mostly this conversation is more than awesome. So inspiring, motivating, amazing, captivating, and quite interesting. Sitting down here to have a conversation with you around the beautiful titles, I need to say it's very great. I have to go over it again to learn. And thank you so much for coming on.
You're welcome. It's been my pleasure.
Yeah, it's my pleasure as well.